I will be reading The Thing About Jellyfish by Allie Benjamin. The interior art is done by Terry and Eric Fan, and the copyright is 2015. It was published by Little Brown and Company. The age for this book is 9 and up. It takes place in a middle school following Susie, a 12-year-old girl. The story is about Susie and how she navigates life and her grief of losing her best friend. The book uses flashbacks, so it's kind of a more mature theme, more mature way of telling a story. It also covers a pretty heavy subject, so that's why the ages are more 9 and up. I'll be reading this story on my iPad, so if there's any pictures, I will be showing it. Ghost Heart. A jellyfish, if you watch it long enough, begins to look like a heart beating. It doesn't matter what kind, the blood-red Aloud with its flashing siren lights, the frilly flower hat, or variety, or the near-transparent moon jelly. Oriel Aurea, their pulse, the way they contract swiftly, then release, like a ghost heart. A heart you can see right through, right into some other world, where everything you ever lost has gone to hide. Jellyfish don't even have hearts, of course. No heart, no brain, no bone, no blood. But watch them for a while. You will see them beating. Mrs. Turton says that if you lived to be 80 years old, your heart would beat 3 billion times. I was thinking about that, trying to imagine a number that large. 3 billion. Count back 3 billion hours, and modern humans don't exist. Just wild-eyed cave people, all hairy and grunting. 3 billion years, and life itself barely exists. And yet here's your heart, doing its job all the time. One beat after the next, all the way up to 3 billion. But only if you get to live that long. It's beating when you're sleeping, when you're watching TV, when you're standing at the beach with your toes in the sand. Maybe while you're standing there, you're looking at sparkles of white light on the dark ocean, wondering if it's worth getting your hair wet again. Maybe you notice that your bathing suit straps are just a little too tight on your sunburned shoulders, or that the sun is too bright in your eyes. You squint a little. You are as live as anybody else right now. Meanwhile, the waves keep rolling over your toes, one after another, like a heartbeat, almost. You can't notice or not. And the elastic is digging in, and perhaps what you notice, more than the sun or the straps, is how cold the water is, or the way the waves create hollow places in the wet sand beneath your feet. Your mom is off at your side somewhere. She's taking a picture, and you know you should turn to her and smile. But you don't. You don't turn, you don't smile, you just keep looking at the sea, and neither of you knows what matters in this moment, or what's about to happen. How could you? And all the while, your heart just keeps going. It does what it needs to do, one beat after another, until it gets the message that it's time to stop, which might happen a few minutes from now, and you don't even know it, because some hearts only beat 412 million times, which might sound like a lot, but the truth is, it barely gets you 12 years. Beginning of Part 1. Guess it won't show. It's a jellyfish. Touch. During the first 3 weeks of 7th grade, I'd learned one thing above all else. A person can become invisible simply by staying quiet. I'd always thought that being seen was about what people perceived with their eyes, but by the time the Eugene Field Memorial Middle School made the fall trip to the aquarium, I, Susie Swanson, had disappeared entirely. Being seen is more about the ears than the eyes, it turns out. We were standing in the touch tank room, listening to a bearded aquarium worker speak into a microphone. "Hold your hand flat," he said. He explained that if we placed our hands in the tank and held them perfectly still, tiny sharks and rays would graze against our palms like friendly house cats. They'll come to you, but you have to keep your hand flat and very still. I would have liked to feel a shark against my fingers, but it was too crowded at the tank, too noisy. I stood in the back of the room, just watching. We had made tie-dyed shirts in art class in preparation for this field trip. We stained our hands neon orange and blue, and now we wore the shirts like psychedelic uniform. I guess the idea was that we'd be easy to spot if any of us get lost. A few of the pretty girls like Aubrey LaValle and Molly Sampson and Jenna Van Hoos, had tied their shirts into knots at their hips. Mine hung over my jeans like an old art smock. It was exactly 1 month since the worst thing had happened, and almost as long since I started not talking. Which isn't refusing to talk like everyone thinks it is. It's just deciding not to fill the world with words if you don't have to. It's the opposite of constant talking, which is what I used to do, and it's better than small talk, which is what people wish I did. If I made small talk, maybe my parents wouldn't insist that I see the kind of doctor you can talk to, which is what I would be doing this afternoon after today's field trip. Frankly, their reasoning didn't make sense. I mean, if a person isn't talking, if that's the whole point, then maybe the kind of doctor you can talk to is the very last person you should have to see. Besides, I knew what the kind of doctor you can talk to meant. It meant my parents thought I had problems with my brain, and not the kind of problems that made it hard to do math or learn to read. It meant they thought I had mental problems, the kind that Franny would call cray-cray, which is short for crazy, which comes from the word craze, which means to fill with cracks and flaws. It meant I had cracks and flaws. "Keep your hands flat," said the aquarium worker to no one in particular, which was fine, because nobody was listening to him anyway. These animals can actually feel heartbeats in the room. You don't need to wiggle your fingers. Justin Maloney, who is a boy who still moves his lips when he reads, keeps trying to grab the raised tails. His pants were so loose that every time he leaned over the water, I could see several inches of his underwear. I noticed that his tie-dye was inside out. Another ray passed, and Justin reached in so fast that he splashed water all over Sarah Johnston, the new girl, who was standing next to him. Sarah swiped the salt water off her forehead and moved a few steps away from Justin. Sarah is very quiet, which I like, and she smiled at me on the first day of school. But then Molly walked over and started talking to her, and then I saw her talking to Aubrey at the lockers, and now Sarah's shirt was knotted at the waist, just like theirs. I pushed a clump of my hair out of my eyes and tried to tuck it in behind my ears. Ms. Frizz, hair so impossible. It immediately fell back into my face again. Dylan Parker snuck up behind Aubrey. He grabbed her shoulders and shook them. "Shark!" he shouted. The boys around him laughed. Aubrey squealed, and so did all the other girls around her, but they were all giggling in that way that girls sometimes do around boys. And of course that made me think of Franny, because if she had been there, she would have been giggling too. I felt that sweaty, sick feeling then, the same thing I felt whenever I thought about Franny. I squeezed my eyes shut for a few seconds. The darkness was a relief. But then a picture popped into my head, and it was not a good one. I imagined the touch tank breaking, the rays and tiny sharks spilling out all over the floor. That made me wonder how long the animals could last before they drowned in the open air. Everything would feel cold and shrill and bright to them, and then the animals would stop breathing forever. I opened my eyes. Sometimes you want things to change so badly you can't even stand to be in the same room with the way things actually are. In the far corner, an arrow pointed down the staircase to another exhibit, jellies, on the floor below. I walked over to the stairs, then glanced back to see if anyone would notice. Dylan flicked water at Aubrey, who squealed again. One of the chaperones walked towards them, already scolding. Even in my neon tie-dye, even with my Ms. Frizz hair, nobody seemed to see me. I walked down the stairs toward the jellies exhibit. No one noticed at all. No one at all.